Welcome to the Fantasy Formula One podcast. I'm Paul. That is Ben.
Yep.
Thank you for joining our conversation. This is a conversation we'd be having anyway. So feel free to follow it and join it on all the social medias at Fantasy Formula One Podcast, or email us at info@fantasyformula1podcast.com. Today, this is a back-to-back episode. We just finished discussing the free practice 2 for the first race, Bahrain, and now we're going to be discussing Ben's Fantasy Formula One lineup, and a little bit of mine too, because all the teams lock in here in less than a day. So let's go ahead and start.
And so just recapping too. So up through practice, you can still change your teams, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Up through the start of qualifying 1. Whenever the qualifying starts,
you're locked in.
You're locked in.
All right.
But the important thing is since we do have a screen now, the right up here at the top of each of the teams says free transfers and has the infinity symbol. Because before the team starts, you can move players, you can move teams all around. Once the season starts, you'll have 2 of 2 or 3 of 3.
Oh, I see.
Or whatever left over up there. Because in between, after each weekend, you get 2 free transfers.
Yep.
If you have at least 1 left over, then that 1 from the previous week will carry over into the next week. So you have 3 transfers for the next week. But then you'll only ever have 3 transfers. So they are use or lose. However, just because you have them doesn't mean you need to use them.
Right.
And I was very prone when I first started playing this back in 2020 to, I have a transfer. Who do I want to move around?
Yeah.
And that's not what you need to do. If you're getting the points and you're doing well,
right.
Then
or who let you down and who you going to drop immediately.
Oh, don't rate. Yeah, and remind me, please, since you have a good memory.
Sure.
Remind me about rage dropping players.
Oh yeah,
drivers.
no. I think there's a little bit of a revenge based dopamine kick that you get from you let me down, you're dead to me. And so
oh gosh,
it's based on our discussions, I have learned that it's hugely important to take a step back, maybe go for a walk.
Yeah.
Come back and say, okay, why did what happened happen?
Yes.
Was this DNF? We were talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
You got a DNF. You got minus 20 points. Ow, that sucks. But was it because your driver made some really stupid error halfway through the race, or was this lap 1, turn 1, everyone's grouped together, and your guy got bumped?
And again, it all comes down to, because I was trying to, off camera, we were talking about how to adjust the stats to, account for that.
Sure.
But we decided that, and I think you're right for bringing it up, that in the end you just have to, it's all personal preference, because most everybody can rationalize away why they quit. As soon as, for example, one of the rage drops I did last year was when one of the drivers' car power unit or whatever conked out on him on the warm-up lap.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I can't believe they would do this, and I remember I dropped him. Well, guess what? Fast forward a week, maybe they're putting up great times. Maybe they fixed all their problems. Now, that's the whole prospect versus suspect, right?
Right.
If Max Verstappen's power unit conked out on him, I'd be like, oh, that's really weird. Red Bull shouldn't have done that. They'll be fine. But as soon as Haas's power unit conks out on him, we're like, well, no, right. They're horrible.
Yeah.
So
maybe make it a rule of thumb that say you miss the events over the weekend, or for some reason you can't track in real time. You open up the app on Monday and you see you see disaster has struck. Wait, give it a day. Feel your feelings, but then make a decision on Tuesday.
What I would do last year is, as soon as towards the end, where once horrible is that you are used up your moves, right?
Yeah.
But what I'd do is I'd go through and redo my team. But instead of hitting save, I just take a screenshot.
Yeah.
So that way I know where my heart was in that moment. And then when you're the next weekend, you're getting ready for qualifying. Because I'm one of those guys who, between FP3 and qualifying is when I update my team.
Right.
So, but then I can look back, well, how mad was I last week? Oh, last week I really this, and this. I'm like, this is the lineup I wanted. And then I can go ahead and put it in if I still feel that way. But if not, then I can be like, nah, I just need to chill out. Red Bull really is good, sort of thing.
Right.
But so here, we have your team here.
Yeah.
And we're going to go through and evaluate and discuss what you've done. And I'll give you my 2 cents for what it's worth.
That sounds great.
So talk to me about Team 1 here, your newbie alpha, which is awesome, by the way.
Oh, thank you. So this is the team that's going to be... this is my Team 1. So that the first team is the only one that's going to be... evaluated on the international
so
scale,
about
right?
that, there's an asterisk there.
Okay.
So in the fine print, you're absolutely right. But in the fine print, the only team capable of winning a prize is the first team. All teams are in the global league.
Okay.
So you will, like, for example, like 2 of my 3 teams were in the top 3% last year.
Sure.
If for some reason my team 3 had won,
Yeah.
they wouldn't have given me the prize. Not saying the prize would go down. I would still be ranked number 1 overall, but I wouldn't have gotten the reward.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So but you're right. There is that mentality of team 1 is your primary team. That is who you go for. That is whenever somebody only does one team, that's their team.
Gotcha.
And then you have your secondary and your tertiary teams that, you can be a little more risky with.
Okay.
Because the only one you can ever get prizes for is your team 1.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
So I went with Newbie Alpha just because this is the
Awesome.
team 1. I wanted to do something a little bit different. We'd had discussions before about how if you haven't picked Max Verstappen and Red Bull Racing as your top racer and constructor, you're already out of the running just because he as a driver and they as a constructor were so dominant last year that it was, if you don't have those 2 settings, you're already in the race for 150th place or below.
Yeah, that's my personal opinion. Is that's true?
So me being the kind of the perpetual advocate for the underdog that I am, I wanted to try. Okay, well, what if what would be the best choice outside of picking Max Verstappen? So I went with some upper tier drivers, but as a kind of a safety net, I still took a kind of a top tier constructor as well as Aston Martin, which has stepped up significantly. So my drivers are Charles Leclerc, Fernando Alonso, who's with Aston Martin, Daniel Ricciardo, who's with RB Racing, and we talked about that a week or 2 ago about how we didn't get a great sample size of his racing capability just because he broke his hand 7 races in. So his overall stats are pretty skewed. However, of the 7 races he was in, he did fairly well. His points per million per $1 million of value was decent. So Charles Leclerc, Fernando Alonso, Daniel Ricciardo, and then I started running out of money, so I went Nico Hülkenberg, but he's at least got that veteran status behind him. And then Yuki Tsunoda, who's managed to stay with RB Racing for a year in and year out, and he's actually outlasted a few people who were expected to kind of kick him to the curb a little bit or force him into that second driver spot. So I think with some more time and maturing, he could be a bit of a dark horse. So that's the logic for Team 1. Also, come at me in the comments. I know nothing relative to most of you, so I can take it, and we'll move on to Team 2. Team 2, I went Red Bull heavy this time around, just to demonstrate some change from Team 1. So Team 2 is Red Bull Dragon Fruit because that's my favorite flavor of Red Bull. It's the green can. I picked it up once, and it was surprisingly good.
Awesome.
It's weird in a good way. So Red Bull, hit us up. We're open for sponsorship.
We are.
But on that note, Max Verstappen's my driver. Kept Daniel Ricciardo as well, and then I got Red Bull Racing and RB. Is it RB1 or it's just RB
just
Racing?
RB,
So Red Bull heavy team there, and then again it was a budget decision from there on out with the rest of my drivers because between Max and Red Bull, that's $58 million of my dollars. So a lot less analytics went into that, and then I got Lance Stroll as my other driver. So I know in the previous episode I disparaged him for his dad owning the team, but look at that, he's on my team. I like.
But he's worth $10 million for a reason, because as soon as he wasn't worth it, they would absolutely.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And look at that hair.
Right, that's glorious. Just flow like that.
And then Team 3, I went high value or high cost driver heavy. So this is the Stathams because the transporter and Italian job.
Right.
And any other thing that Jason Statham's in, he's driving. So Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, who I had some concerns about as well in terms of his costs. We had discussed this before, that his results resulted in him getting a much higher value than I think was initially anticipated. But McLaren made some significant strides over last season, and it was last season, and And so my confidence in both his pedigree as a driver and in the platform that constructor offers is high. And so then I also got Lewis Hamilton because it's kind of hard to argue with a 7-time world champion.
Right.
And then budgetary constraints hit me again. So Nico Hülkenberg and Bottas. I don't know much about him at all.
And I know he's been around for a while. And my problem with Valtteri Bottas was, and I know I hit the O really hard. I think it's Bottas.
Bottas. No, it might be
Bottas.
It depends on which commentator you've listened to.
My Indiana Midwestern hard R's are coming out of me, Bottas. But the problem with him is that he only had like between a 0.2 and a 0.5 points per million last year.
Value. Okay.
But also, and that's a great equalizer, is the fact that these teams now they have their kick Sauber,
yeah.
Like, so it's a whole new, it's new money, it's new management, it's new people.
And kick Sauber was Alfa Romeo, correct?
Yeah, they were Alfa Romeo. So last year, like, they have, as soon as the cars completely change color, completely change name, that's new money. That's, as we both know, that's new management coming in. That's new investors coming in. That's new desires from the top that change. And, if anybody who thinks that, your investor or your backing isn't good, well, okay, no one's going to put bad spark plugs in their car.
Sure.
As soon as you take one spark plug out of your engine and then try to drive the thing, like, it's going to go bad quick. So, and so this is just even more so. So, the lesson, the only thing I have to say about Bottas was that he didn't do well last year, but now it's new money. So I can't say anything negative against putting him on your team.
Gotcha.
Just, looking at last year was,
Mm-hmm. Now, with the Stathams, so I've got three pretty indisputably great drivers. But if you look down at my constructors, I've got Williams, which again improved last year.
Yeah,
and RB. So that and so that's where I took the biggest hit. I've got a 6.3 million and 8.5 million constructor. And
again, it's not necessarily. I don't like saying that anything's wrong or right in this because it just all depends on how they race.
Sure,
and And we keep talking about it a lot, that all these drivers and these constructors, these are the teams that deserve to be here. So for me to say, well, Valtteri Bottas isn't a good driver, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying the way the rules work, his driving equated to whatever it was.
Certainly.
And so to say that with Williams might do great. The issue is that with constructors, they get the sum total of all their drivers' points, and then they can get bonuses for how well the drivers do and how fast the pit times are and things like that. So as soon as you have a constructor that is, say, Williams doesn't put up as many points as Red Bull, as Mercedes. So yes, you're only paying $6 million, whereas with Red Bull, you're paying like 27, 28.
Sure.
But your total, what are they? And there's some word for like with stocks or something, but like your total amount of points you can get. Yes, if Williams suddenly starts placing 1 and 2, then you got a world championship team for $6 million.
Right.
Probably won't. So with Williams, as soon as the drivers get 1 point per million, then you're looking at with, let's say each of the drivers, like let's say with Williams, each driver is 10 points. They're a $10 million cost, right? Which they're not. Like one's 5.5 and one's something. But as soon as you have a team that has 2 drivers that cost $10 million, and let's say they do really well and they each put up 10 points. Well, then your team is only going to get 20 points. So as soon as you have a team like Williams that's putting up 20 points, or you have a team like Red Bull who has a 35-point driver and a 25-point driver, well, then you're just never going to be competitive.
I gotcha.
So now that being said, as soon as Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, and Lando Norris all start ringing in podiums, well, then shoot, then that's great, because then now suddenly like Lewis Hamilton is putting up 25, 26, 30 points a race.
Yeah.
Well, that'll greatly eclipse. As soon as you have 3 30-point drivers and one with a DRS, well, then that's going to greatly eclipse your Red Bull and stuff like that.
Sure.
So it depends on how you want to risk it and what you want your strategy to try to be.
Yeah.
And this year is is new. So like, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying it could work.
Oh yeah, well,
it absolutely.
That was all very, very courteous and civil as well.
It's true. Well, and I hate being that dude who's like, well, you're not going to do well, dude. You know what? Max Verstappen could crash turn 1, lap 1 tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And then guess what? Red Bull is going to start the season in a deficit, and everybody who backed Red Bull is going to be like,
But you know, that's also the beauty of this. It's dynamic from week to week. You do have those 2 transfers per week. You do have the ability to shift and update your team as you see fit.
Yeah.
And so that can change. And so, but that being said, since you got the very kind and civil language out of the way, I do want to put you on the spot a little bit.
Okay.
So you're looking at my 3 teams here.
Yeah.
I have 3 very different methodologies for the builds. They may all be awful methodologies, and that's fine. You're not going to hurt my feelings here, but like, can I get your rundown of these teams,
sure.
or at least
absolutely,
if you want to prioritize, or
I'll just go one by one. Right now, sure. Of all of them, I like your T2 build the best, the Red Bull Dragon Fruit.
Okay,
and the reason is you can't look at the last 3 seasons of Formula One without thinking that Red Bull is going to rinse and repeat.
Yeah, and
if Red Bull is going to rinse and repeat, you have to have Max Verstappen and you have to have Red Bull as a constructor. In the long term, you have to, otherwise you won't keep up. That being said, so for your team 2, Alex Albon, and I'd have to pull up the stats on him. He's not bad. Lance Stroll, I think Lance Stroll didn't put up significant points last season. As soon as you're going to spend $10 million on Lance Stroll, I would rather see you spend $8 million on Yuki Tsunoda, and then take that other $2 million and bump up Alex Albon to somebody else.
Well, see, that was my issue. There's a fairly significant gap in driver price between. I think it jumps from. I think it jumps from 10 to about $15 million, and that really skews your options, because yes, so Stroll and Albon were more last minute, and then it was based on, oh wait, I still have 2. If we scroll down just a little bit, you can see how much I have left in. There
you go. Oh yeah, you still have $0.7 million.
Yeah,
see, that's really close.
My first run through, as I was putting those teams together, I was looking at maybe $2.5 million. So I bumped up to Lance Stroll, not because of any major affinity for him, but it was like, oh well, am I going to leave $2 million on the table, or can I jump up to a $10 million?
No, and that makes sense. Which that makes sense.
But that being said, who knows how arbitrary the dollar values assigned by Fantasy F1 are?
I completely, and I never thought about that. I completely agree, because like the reason why Max Verstappen finished out last year at $30 million,
right? They
just didn't drop his price. Everybody else kind of took a little bit of a reduction, except for Lando Norris. He went up in money. He finished last year like at 19, and they bumped him up.
And I'm sure it's not arbitrary, but we don't know the key metrics that drive those price points.
My guess is they try to make it so if you had a certain team, you couldn't have other people,
right?
Yeah. So and keep in mind, and that's a huge asterisk. And I'm not trying to sit here and be like last year's lessons. And one of the greatest quotes, we were talking about movies where we were off camera.
Sure.
The movie 13 Days, about the Cuban Missile Crisis with Kevin Costner, came out in the early aughts, late 90s.
Yeah.
One of the quotes, like the guy who played JFK in the movie, they were talking about the guns of August, guns of October, guns of August, about World War I, and how you would have technology that advanced, right? And so now you have water-cooled machine guns, and you have planes dropping grenades, and people are still going into battle in cavalry, right? And they're doing mass, people charging into battle with bayonets fixed up against machine guns.
Right.
And one of the quotes he gave, one of the things he said, talking about that movie, or talking about that book in the movie, was that the lessons of the previous war were no longer valid, unquote. And so that is the huge issue that anybody who looks at last season and says, here's what's going on this season, is the lessons of the previous war might not be valid anymore.
Yeah.
So looking at last season, Alex Albon, don't have him. He has gotten a DNF trouble. He made a podium once, or he got in the top 5 once, but that was it. Lance Stroll's a big thing of nothing. Like he did fine, but he's a secondary driver on a team that, and that's the thing is with Aston Martin, they did great start of the season, and then they dropped off.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like you still have other capable drivers, but Lewis Hamilton was the Max Verstappen of a couple of years ago.
Exactly.
And he's still there, but it's been a few years,
and at some point Max Verstappen will not be world champion. At some point someone's going to beat him. But when is it? And how many years? Like
John Sargent.
What?
John Sargent.
Is that what?
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh. But like, for example, as soon as and that's a strategy we can definitely talk about, is as soon as you, like with right now, if Alex Albon finishes 7th, right? And as soon as with your Williams, with your team 3, right? As soon as the 2 Williams drivers finish top 15, as soon as, a Logan Sargent finishes number 10.
Oh, yeah, I said John Sargent.
John Sargent. Oh, sorry. No, I thought you were talking about, because his brother races NASCAR.
Oh, gotcha. Well,
and that's what I thought you were talking about.
Nope, not at all. I just completely forgot his name was Logan. I do that to people, man. Like, I've got this friend who I consider him a pretty close friend. His name is Jordan. And for the first year of knowing him, I had to fight every impulse to call him Roland.
Roland?
I have no idea. It's just one of those things that, it's kind of the, the smelling toast about to have a stroke situation.
Exactly.
So, I'm sorry. Logan Sargent.
Logan Sargent.
Would have been a really funny joke if I gotten it right. But, no.
But with Williams, right? As soon as Williams finishes, both drivers finish in the top 15, then they're the good team to have. They're the budget team to have. So I'm loath to sit here and say no, because the lessons might not be valid.
But let's do it.
Okay, here we go. Here's what we're doing then.
I'm learning.
For me, Aston Martin, they did really bad the second half of last year.
Yeah.
So Aston Martin is a good gamble. If you want to gamble with them, gamble with Fernando Alonso.
Sure.
Because he's a 2-time world champion.
Yeah.
You can if it works, cool. But Stroll is a liability, and so is having Aston Martin as your constructor. Because as soon as Stroll does poorly, and Fernando Alonso does mediocre, you're now suddenly, it's not that they're doing bad, they just might not be worth the $13 million that they have.
That's a great talking point right there, because I've been going into this, thinking, constructor, like, you got Red Bull Racing, you got Max, you get to double your points. That's so cool. But you can't think in terms of the best driver of the team when you're picking your constructor.
Exactly.
You have to look at the totality
of
the driver performance.
Yeah.
And so when there is a massive disparity between your driver 1 and driver 2, that's a liability.
It is.
And that's something I have.
And especially now, don't get me wrong, as soon as Aston Martin was $9 million, I'd have them on my team, at least one of them. Why? Because it's only $9 million. You get a lot more return. So whatever, let's call them $14 million, right? Because so as soon as they are a $7 million team instead of a $14 million, as soon as they're a $7 million constructor instead of a $14 million constructor, you basically doubled your return on investment.
Yep.
Right? So looking exponentially like that, as soon as you have Williams, well, yeah, like they probably won't put up as many points as Aston Martin, but Williams is also half the cost.
Sure.
And you better put that money towards good use like you did with your third team. You got the top 3. So looking at across the board, I'm leery of Aston Martin. After the first race, we'll see. But then I'll do one big, huge caveat for all your teams that I do recommend. So Aston Martin, that's my point on them. Charles Leclerc, he's really good. Like, right, he's Ferrari. And if Ferrari does do good, Charles Leclerc will be in the seat. However, last year, Ferrari kept breaking my heart. They qualify well, finish low.
Yep.
But also, again, I keep saying, I'm not trying to double talk. I lost my friends league that you're joined this year. I lost my friends league because somebody I was either Leclerc or Sainz. I couldn't afford to make the switch. We were matched, perfectly matched. He had Leclerc or Sainz or whatever, and I had somebody else. And I saw him gaining on me. I didn't have the money in the budget to match him.
Gotcha.
And I came in 4th instead of 1st.
Oh.
So, and I have a lot of Ferrari in one of my teams too.
Okay,
so I think Ferrari is a team to go to. I think they're doing really well this year. They looks like they should be doing really well. And that'll remind me about the caveat. So Charles Leclerc, no problem. Daniel Ricciardo, absolutely. I have him all through my teams. He has such a good pedigree with Red Bull, not beating around the bush with how they've, they're working on their farm team here, their feeder team, like with RB.
Yeah.
Like, I'm all about that. I think that's perfect. Yuki Tsunoda, he had a 0.8 points per million last year. And most of the times, if I remember correctly, like he's overly aggressive. He's kind of a hothead. He's maturing a little bit, but also at least 1 or 2 of the times he DNF'd, it was for a mechanical issue.
Yeah.
So now that RB's there, hopefully that goes away.
So and again, I know it's all for the lights, camera, and action of it, but if you do watch Drive to Survive, he was featured pretty heavily a couple times, and he'd be fine until he wasn't, and then it would be like, just shut up and let me drive.
See the helmet fire, watch the wheels fall off, and
exactly.
So I'm a huge proponent right now. Maybe I'll think differently, 2 days from now, but I'm a huge fan of RB, Daniel Ricciardo, and Yuki Tsunoda. Yeah. They're all over my team. Absolutely. If you're looking for a budget team where everybody's under 10 million and has upward mobility, and somebody like Daniel Ricciardo has been around, he has that experience. Yuki Tsunoda did I said, he did fine.
Yeah, no,
last year he wasn't great, but they're not going to. I don't think they're going to put up enough points to actually propel you to be competitive.
Yeah,
but they're a solid foundation team.
But given how brief your opportunity as a driver in F1 is, the fact if you can stay around for more than 2 years, you're doing something good enough.
Yeah.
This leads me to ask, and again, I'm sorry, I'm taking us down another rabbit trail.
Fine. Love it.
So Red Bull Racing, RB farm team.
Yes.
Still racing within the same race.
And for anybody real quick uninitiated in Major League Baseball, the Major League, in the United States, the MLB, they have farm teams, a whole farm team system of minor leagues and then AAAs and AA. Yeah. So you get into a farm team for a team, and you're supposed to get better and better and better and eventually make it there. But sorry, go ahead.
No, that's very good to explain, because I'm throwing that around like that's common. So that being said, and there's clearly a high level of collaboration, like when we saw Daniel Ricciardo sent over to RB Racing after being the reserve driver for Red Bull. Do we know what the level of correlation is between engineers as far as the RB vehicle platform versus the Red Bull Racing platform? Is one significantly faster than another?
I don't know. I would just be purely speculating. They have to be related.
Right?
They can't be two different microcosms. And what I'm saying that purely based on the fact that in the Drive to Survive most recent season, with all the drivers moving around there, they're using RB. Now maybe they had some, it's a totally different team. It's not related to us. They pulled the wool off that. That is a farm team for Red Bull Racing.
Yeah, I mean, they made no secret of it when it was still AlphaTauri.
Yeah. So there has to be some correlation. I don't think there is a secret that is in Red Bull Racing that is not shared with now RB.
So why are they such a mid-tier team?
Because they started out different. And again, I'm guessing on this, is our Red Bull Racing wasn't always a top-tier team. It's only been within the last 3 or 4 years
that's a good point.
that they propelled up.
Okay.
And at some point along the lines, they acquired what is now RB. It was then AlphaTauri, now RB.
Gotcha.
And I don't know when or how that worked out. At some point, they, for lack of a better term, got into bed together, and now they're flying in formation. And so I think it's not they were friends, Red Bull got better, now they're helping. I think it's Red Bull Racing did great. They pulled in AlphaTauri, and now they're trying to build them up into a feeder team to Red Bull Racing.
Okay, so to me, it would make RB Racing as a constructor could be a huge undervalue right now.
I think so,
because if you look at previous seasons where you had Lando Norris getting pissed off at McLaren because it was a better driver than the platform he was placed in. Similar to what Lewis Hamilton's going through right now with Mercedes is. You are a better caliber of driver than the vehicle that you're in. Yeah. That does not appear to be the case with RB now.
I think that's a good point.
If they have the same support as Red Bull Racing, and they're only $8.5 million, and you have fairly reliable drivers in Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda. I mean, hopefully, and this is me idealizing a little bit.
Sure, but
I think the potential is there for that constructor to be massively undervalued.
Completely agree. And Daniel Ricciardo's a Grand Prix winner.
Yeah.
He's won.
Yeah.
Like he's shown that he can do it. And I know there's a lot of drama in Drive to Survive Season 6 is really good showing that. But yeah, I think he, not got big for his britches, but he wanted to be the number one driver. Something went wrong with McLaren. I don't know what it was. He found himself on the outs. Red Bull scooped him up. Yeah. He said Makopa, he kissed the ring, got into the third driver's seat, and he performed in a clutch. And now he's, I think, a tie driver, if not the lead driver for RB.
Oh, sure.
So I do agree. And that's an interesting point, though, about Fantasy Formula One, is there's some amount of pricing based on name, like Mercedes and Ferrari. Ferrari hasn't won a championship in, 10, 12, 15 years or whatever. And Red Bull, but Red Bull's hot, so they're all the money. And as soon as McLaren did great at the end of the season, now they're really high up.
Yeah.
Aston Martin did great at the beginning of the season and then went down, and now they're still very affordable. AlphaTauri didn't do well last year, so they're priced accordingly.
So can you look past the recency bias
exactly
at the end of the season in the pricing format,
or do you only look at the recency bias because that's what matters?
That's true.
I am ignoring the recency bias with McLaren. I do not have McLaren on any of my teams right now.
Okay.
because they're good. I don't know if Lando Norris is worth $23 million.
Sure.
If he's worth a quarter of the budget. Now, and this will bring to a huge caveat that I'll go ahead and put on here. Since this is a new racing season, right? And this isn't me being nice and wanting to hug everyone. Since this is a new racing season, these are all the best guesses. As soon as, for any reason, Stroll gets on the podium, his price is going to skyrocket. And if you have Lance Stroll on your thing, he'll be worth 11, 12 million next week.
Sure.
And then if he places on the podium again, because this is exactly what happened with Fernando Alonso, he'll start climbing in price. As soon as you're Lando Norris, and as soon as you're Lando Norris and he places 15th, and then next week he places 10th, and he just stays in that bottom half, his price isn't necessarily going to drop. But what it is, so that it gives you lots of upward mobility. If you get like what you have here for the first race, you'll be able to see how people do and what people do.
Okay.
And if you have suddenly as soon as Haas finishes in the top 10 with both drivers, dude, all their prices are going to go up, and you're going to have everybody throwing Haas on as their second team.
Gotcha.
Because it's really low cost and they're bringing in the money.
Yeah.
So if you have them already on your team, you're going to, and this is what happened last year with McLaren, whoever had McLaren, as soon as that 1 race, 2 race started to show that increase, whoever got McLaren on their team just rode it up and ended up having, $6-7 million, $10 million drivers that were bringing in as many points as Red Bull.
Okay, cool.
So, and that's kind of the strategy. So that's the caveat I say is right now at this stage, I appreciate that you have a nice big array of people on your team, because it gives you a chance for as soon as Lewis Hamilton does really well, or as soon as Fernando Alonso comes out and they have great mods and they're doing wonderful, then you can jump on the train for whichever person you get, and you're still early enough that you can divest from everybody who doesn't work and get the people who are doing really well. So yeah, and so that's really what I think is fine. I think you have a lot of faith in Aston Martin that I really don't have.
Fair.
And the thing I would caution you about with Williams is that even if both Williams drivers put up 10 points each, which they won't, but if they do,
right.
I hope they do. I want to make sure people know this. Like I have literally looked around on the Williams website trying to find somebody I can reach out to and say, I have a podcast. Can you send me a Williams flag with Sargent's signature on it?
Yeah.
I can't find it. I need to figure it out. But like, I would proudly hang that because he is my countryman, right? But as the realistic point is, as soon as Team Red Bull Racing is bringing in 100 points a race, or even 60, 50 points a race, I don't see Williams, even if they both do well and they're both in the points.
Yeah.
If they both bring in 10, 20 points each, I don't see them putting up enough points to be competitive.
Well, I mean, and that's exactly it. You were talking about Yuki Tsunoda's value. His points per million is 0.8. So at $8 million, he's still giving you positive points, but based on his value at $8 million. So that means you're getting 6-ish, 6 point something points because math. But so that's a good ratio, but at the low valuation, maybe if he was $30 million getting 0.8, you're gonna get a lot more benefit from that. So yeah.
And so you have to have your Max Verstappens and your Charles Leclercs and
right.
Maybe even your Lando Norrises,
Yeah.
But
So like as a lower tier, he's a great driver.
He's a great driver.
Like as a I only had $7 million left, he's a great driver.
And that's why they priced out that's why they put Red Bull so high.
Yeah.
Is so that way we are forced to work with the lower tier, in quotes, drivers. So now, like, especially with your team one, right? With like Leclerc, God, we expect him to be top 6, if not the podium.
Sure.
Like if I'm going to make a guess, hey, who's going to be on the podium? He's one of them.
Yep.
Red Bull, I'm expecting them to do great things. And that's the killer part is as soon as Sergio Perez has engine trouble and Max Verstappen races hard and just comes in 5th on merit, then everybody should be dropping Max Verstappen and Red Bull from their teams because they're just not worth the money. They're the inverse of what is going on with Williams.
Yep.
Because as soon as you're spending, 60% of your budget and you're pulling in as much money as a team that you're only spending, 30% of your budget.
Got it. Yep.
There you go. But also and again, that's why I really do, I appreciate what you're doing here because it gives you lots of options. The a strategy I had late last year that I haven't decided if I'm going to do it this year is to have your primary team and then have your secondary and tertiary teams each be no more than 2 trades different from your primary.
Okay, just so you have like a much better A/B comparison.
Exactly.
I see.
So you can tell, and then as soon as you're like, man, Daniel Ricciardo couldn't find first gear all race.
Yeah.
Well, okay, then you can go through to all your teams and you can still make that switch.
I see. Okay.
And you can kind of help it out. But and again, any given day, anything can happen. It normally doesn't, but
sure. But yeah,
But this is
I appreciate that level of clinical refinement. Yeah, mine right now was, let's try 3 completely different flawed methodologies.
And I promise you, if you go talk to somebody who did better than me or somebody else who's really into this, they might be like, because like last year, my mentality was, no, you want 3 completely different strategies.
Yeah.
It just sucks when one strategy is doing great, the other 2 aren't. And then you start to try to make adjustments to try and get them to catch up.
Yeah.
So my strategy going in here is I'm going to have them pretty closely related just so I can make those switches. And for me, the big issue is Mercedes versus Ferrari, because last year they were both breaking my heart, but this year they're completely different cars and they're fully capable.
Uh-huh.
So which do I back more? Well, right now I have one team that's a little mix of both, and I have a Red Bull heavy like you have, except I have Tsunoda, Ricciardo, and Tsunoda, Ricciardo. Who else do I have on? I have to look. I have my phone here. Yeah. I hate dead air time, but
no, you're fine.
Talk about it.
But what's fun is you just mentioned though that both of them have very capable cars compared to last year. But
yeah,
what's that based on? Was that based on practice?
Exactly.
Today?
Well, and the fact that everybody, and that's one interesting thing that we can talk about is that actually here goes. So I have for my first team.
Yeah. I
have basically your second team.
Okay.
Except I have Zogan Yu instead of Stroll and Pierre Gasly instead of I have Max Verstappen, Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda, Pierre Gasly, Zogan Yu.
Oh, interesting.
And then I have both of those.
Okay.
And that's my Red Bull heavy team because based on the numbers from last year, but again, I don't know. But what were we talking about just a second ago? I mentioned, you said something and then...
Oh, you'd made the statement that both Mercedes and Ferrari broke your heart, but that was last year, and this year they have much more capable cars.
Oh, yeah. And you can't... So at the beginning of last season, Max Verstappen was just taillights in the distance.
Yeah.
By the end of last season, you had Mercedes and Ferrari like challenging them, no kidding, challenging them. And we're not talking about Singapore, Ferrari won because Red Bull just was having a rough day and their car was an outfit for the track. I'm guessing Red Bull's going to lose Singapore again this year.
Okay.
Because they just will. But the gap between the field and Max shrank dramatically over the course of the year because as soon as you start racing, all the bunch of people with the notepads and calculators are looking at what Red Bull's doing, and they're going to start, whoever's winning, people are going to try and emulate.
Sure.
Which is why a lot of these cars now, they look a lot like the Red Bull of last year. And what Red Bull do, they took what Mercedes failed to do
at the beginning.
And so now the RB20 is a completely different car than the rest of the field.
Oh, I see.
So all the other cars are going to be fast, and they would have caught up or surpassed Red Bull with these cars last year.
Yeah.
But it depends on if Red Bull can make that next leap. If they can't, then they're going to be struggling for first place, and everybody's going to divest of Red Bull, and we're going to go with Ferrari, and we're going to go with Mercedes, and we're going to have a gunfight.
Okay, yeah.
Which I kind of hope that happens.
Oh, sure, that's the fun of it.
But as soon as Red Bull Racing is 2 cars, taillights in the distance from the rest of the pack in Bahrain tomorrow, then we all, me included, need to get back to the Red Bull constructor, Max Verstappen, because if you don't, you will not be competitive in 5 races.
Yep.
Because as soon as Max Verstappen does great for 5 races and then crashes out, you still have so many more points.
It's too much of a lead to overcome.
And with Haas, I was a huge fan of Haas when I first started going because they're, like you said, they're the value driver. There's nothing but the sky is the limit.
Sure.
And it's if they both cars get on the track and both cars finish the race, then great, then keep them. But as soon as they start, because they got rid of they were unhappy with how the team was going. They came in last year.
Right.
They fired their team, or they parted ways with their team principal. So the sky's the limit there. But
until then, for them, the mark of victory is that they didn't lose you points.
Yeah,
which is sad.
So to sum it all up, because I've been rambling for a while. To sum it all up, it depends on what kind of risk you want to take.
I see.
If you want to go with the prevailing wisdom, well, Mercedes is questionable. Ferrari, I don't know. They look like they're doing better, but they also look like they were doing great, except for the Grand Prix last year.
Mm-hmm.
You go heavy Red Bull, fill it in with who you can that didn't cost you too many points, and you just run. The problem is you're putting all your faith in Red Bull, and it's very possible that Red Bull, not very possible, it's hardly possible, but it's still a non-zero possibility that all the other cars, as soon as they get going, Red Bull's design just didn't evolve as much as it should, and everyone's passing them.
Sure.
And if that happens, then you're screwed. Because everyone else's value is going to go up, Red Bull's is going to stay stagnant, and you're going to be losing money.
You're going to sell off at a loss.
You're going to sell off at a loss. However, if that's wrong, the other side is, like which you have here, as soon as Ferrari and Mercedes are literally sharing a podium with Red Bull, well then now suddenly you can have a Ferrari-Mercedes combo that together might actually be putting up more points than Red Bull will be having with RB.
Interesting. Okay.
So I am a mix. I have two that are Red Bull heavy. One of mine is the Red Bull with the RB. The other is Red Bull Racing with Ferrari.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have, right now, I have Sergio Perez as the lead.
Oh, interesting.
Because I couldn't afford to have Ferrari, Red Bull as constructor, and then Max.
Yeah.
So I went for the second driver who is 10 million less. And then there's that. And then I have another build that used to be all Ferrari with a Mercedes as well as a constructor. And now it's splitting Ferrari and Mercedes with constructor and Leclerc and Hamilton.
Okay.
But then the risk is as soon as, Lewis Hamilton can't, as soon as the Ferrari can't find first gear in a race and Lewis Hamilton's struggling to stay fifth, well then now I need to hurry up and try and shift while everyone else goes up. So
I gotcha.
It just depends on what kind of gamble you're willing to have.
Okay.
What you're trying to do. Well,
hey, I appreciate the breakdown. This that really spells it out a lot more for me in terms of the kind of the mental processes to consider. Yeah. And this is going to be really exciting. I'm going to leave my weird F1 guinea pigs for week one, and we can talk through adjustments next week.
We will talk one quick thing before we go. Chips. We haven't talked about chips yet. So if you notice, I don't know. Oh, there you go. Okay. So you have 6 chips.
Yes.
As you can see, the top 3 are locked. You can't use them right now. And the reason is because limitless means we're going to go ahead. Where's going on? Where's my mouse go? There. My computer is.
It's there.
There we go. There it is. So limitless can't be used. I'm going to explain what it is. Okay. So limitless is you have no salary cap. And they don't want you to do that at the very beginning because the salary caps aren't necessarily good or bad, right?
Right.
So at some point, you can click it and you can have all the top 10 people. I advise you to use this one much later in the season when you know who the good drivers are and you know who the bad drivers are.
Absolutely.
And then you click a button, suddenly you have all the good drivers. The risk you're taking with this one is that as soon as you have Ferrari and Red Bull and Mercedes all in the same team, somebody's going to do poorly.
No, absolutely. Yeah, they're all competing with each other. One's gonna drag you down.
Yeah, and then so wild card. I think that was you can reset your entire team without a penalty.
Okay.
I think you can have as many changes as you want. Final fix is for you to change out somebody in between qualifying and the race.
Oh wow!
And the important thing is with this final fix one is don't use it unless somebody's hurt, because you carry the points they had with them. So if I did really bad in qualifying and you swap me out for you still carry my -9 points with you.
Oh, okay.
And so you want to make this because first off, men qualifying low, finishing high is good, but also as soon as like somebody breaks their hand, you need to use this. Otherwise, you're carrying that with you. Autopilot is whoever does best on your team gets your 3x multiplier. Your 2x multiplier for the DRS.
Gotcha.
So that way, that's a little more of a low risk, low reward. But as soon as you have 2 really good drivers and either one will do fine, put it on autopilot, it'll be fine.
Nice.
No negative means you can't take negative points, which is really super cool. So as soon as you have a track where, I don't know, people tend to crash out a lot, or if you're like, man, I don't know. I mean, and there's a lot of different reasons you would want to use it, but the no negative just prevents that from happening.
Sure.
And then the extra DRS, you retain your 2 DRS, and this just gives you a 3x DRS boost. You can't stack them, but what it does is you would make your second driver cancel. Then, like for example, in your team 3 here, right? the Stathams, you would move your 2 DRX over to Lando Norris and give Max Verstappen your 3X.
Okay.
So it's significant. And that one, of all the chips, they're all very important to play, but that 3X multiplier is huge. You need to play that very sparingly, and we'll probably have a whole podcast about how to do it.
Okay, great.
I used it willy-nilly last year, and like you want to use it for somebody on like a really strong race they have. And that'd be a lot of research for you and me to do, and we'll figure that out.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right, everybody. Well, any parting words to save rounds?
Oh, no. No, this is great.
Sweet. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching and listening. We will see you after the race. Cheers.